Okay, so Ramon here for Memories, and why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Torin Brown. I'm a 28-year-old millennial caregiver for my mom who has mid-stage Alzheimer's, and I've been caring for her full time for about 6 months now.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing. So 6 months is so recent. Do you want to walk us through like what the diagnosis was like and how your experiences have been over the past 6 months?
Sure. So I don't think for anybody there's really a straightforward process. Mine was definitely kind of convoluted and confusing, but when I was 15 years old, my mom started forgetting a lot of things. She never really knew my friends' names or could remember them, which I used to be offended by, thinking she just wasn't putting the time into it. But now, of course, in hindsight, I know that it was dementia. But she went in 2008 to have some memory tests done and was diagnosed with MCI, which stands for mild cognitive impairment. And that does not always mean a diagnosis of dementia. I mean, technically, if you have a severe concussion, you could have MCI. But it just continued to progress from there. I went away from college, and actually, I've lived away from home for 10 years now, and my stepfather was her full-time caregiver, even though he never really looked at it that way. And also, there's so much denial and stigma about Alzheimer's and dementia that I think, especially for people in my mom and my stepdad's generation, it was more difficult for them to accept. But I knew about a year ago that she was declining a little more, and I wanted to come home to help out. So I moved back home in September of 2019. It was not meant to be permanent, but I kind of saw the situation was a little bit more dire. My stepdad wasn't doing very well health-wise. And then suddenly in January, he passed away in January of 2020 of this year. And that is sort of when my whole life shifted and I became the full-time caregiver for my mom. And I knew that I wanted to basically not necessarily prolong her life, because sometimes that can be really horrible for this particular disease. What kind of life is it at the very late stages? But I really just wanted to give her as much joy and stimulation for her mind as possible for as long as I can. So that's really what I try to do every day.
Wow, that's amazing. And I just want to extend my condolences about your stepfather. Oh my goodness.
Thank you. Yeah, it's only been 6 months and it feels like a day, and yet at the same time it feels like it's been a lifetime already, because it's just such a journey.
And I can only imagine like so much has happened in the world in the past 6 months to also go along with
Right.
this major change in your family life must have been
Exactly. It was really wild. I started to try to make plans, thinking, well, now that this has happened, these are sort of the things that I, can do or might want to do. And none of those plans ended up working out. I had hoped to travel to the UK because I'm actually half English. I've got family there. And she loves it there and also has very close friends. So I figured, oh, well, we could go there for longer now and spend some time with them. And obviously that didn't happen. So I've had to definitely roll with the punches, kind of like everybody else, and think on my feet with ways to keep her engaged and active while we've not been able to interact with anybody.
Yeah, for sure. Like, can you mind maybe giving us some examples of strategies you've been using to kind of keep her engaged?
Yeah, so initially when the pandemic clearly became a pandemic and such an issue, we came down to stay with my brother here. He's actually my half brother, so my mom was his stepmom for a while. And so luckily being with him meant that we could be playing games in the evening. So my mom and we love board games. We're a huge board game family. So anytime that I could tell she was getting restless or agitated, and when it was colder, still in March, I would try to bring out a board game of sorts. She likes backgammon, bananagrams, anything like that. And she's definitely a lot slower than she used to be at them, but that means the game takes more time, which is wonderful. So we can sit for a while. She also used to love coloring with my stepdad. That is one amazing thing that he really started her doing, was sitting and coloring. And she has the routine of every evening she would sit and color. They would sit together and color. And he would help her out because she's colorblind as well. So he'd help her out with picking out the colors to use and showing her the animals or whatever it was. So I really wanted to harness that. I got her lots more coloring books, more colors for colored pencils, and made sure there was a space where she would always see the coloring. So anytime she wanted to, she could sit there. Then I took it a step further, and I was just trying to think of time. I'm like, what will take up at least an hour of her time where she can sit independently and I can still do something else? So I started to get her into painting. And now since we've been in our new house, we have a pretty big garden here, and she's been gardening. So these are all things that she already was passionate about. And I've just tried to think of ways to make it easier for her.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I think one thing I'm just so amazed by is your just adaptability, because like your life really got changed so quickly in
Yeah.
such a short time.
Such a short time.
So I guess my next question would be like, do you have any like external family or extended family support to help you, or what does that kind of look like for you?
Right. So actually, when my stepfather passed away, one of the first people to come was my mom's very best friend. They've been best friends since they were in their mid-20s, actually. They call each other their soul sisters. There's a group of them. And this was in January, so it was before, there was a, travel ban and all of that. So she immediately came down and spent over a week with us. And she is somebody that my mom speaks to every single day without fail. And if she doesn't speak to her, she'll leave her like 100 messages on our answering machine. And that's wonderful. So they talk all the time. So actually, even though they haven't been able to see each other, just knowing that she can pick up the phone and even just leave a rambling message has been really helpful to her. She's also been in touch with my uncle, my stepdad's brother. We definitely aren't speaking as much as we should. I know I definitely should be calling more, but they talk, and when they do, they talk for a long time. And then in person, I have my brother, as I mentioned, and my sister-in-law, and my nephew, who's 20 months old. And because we sort of quarantined together, we spend a lot of time actually in person. We don't have to worry so much about distancing. And that support has been really fantastic because I know that she's sitting with somebody who I can trust and who kind of knows the routine because we were quarantined together, what she needs. And now that we're in our own house and we've been alone, we're kind of coming up with ways that we can make it easier for myself. So we had a pretty rough day a few days ago, and my sister-in-law said, next time, just text me the word, just say, can we switch? And I will go and take care of my nephew who's 20 months old, because sometimes that can be easier. And she'll just come and hang out with my mom. And that gives me a break and time with my nephew. She gets time with my mom. And then other support has been from actually long-term friends who have now we've reconnected with through my Instagram and my Facebook stories. Family friends that I haven't heard the names of since I was a teenager or younger are now calling my mom. So every day my mom will get at least 2 or 3 phone calls. And to her, it's like they haven't spoken in years, so she just repeats herself, but they love it. And they will talk for a minimum of half an hour per person. So really, there's like hours of the day being taken up with these phone calls with old friends, coloring, gardening, and then hanging out with my sister-in-law or whoever else is coming by. So actually, the support group has been way stronger than I expected it to be, which is wonderful. And it's just growing. I mean, there's so many more people that we're now connecting with who want to spend time with her.
That's amazing, and I honestly think it's so great that you have such an expansive support group who are able to provide support both in person and remotely. And I imagine that can be a huge, almost relief for you, so you can get some time for yourself, right?
Definitely. And I know I've heard from other caregivers whose parents or loved ones are in the later stages that, as the disease progresses, that support group tends to shrink because it gets harder, and I understand that. So I'm trying to really educate the support group we have so that they can be more prepared to help out for longer than normally they would be able to. And also it keeps my mom used to it. She's not great. She's very social and outgoing, but like having a stranger come around wouldn't work out very well. So the people that we do have coming around, I want to make sure that they're going to stay and that she's comfortable with them. So really just letting them know, like, the best way to have a phone conversation with someone who's not going to remember what they talked about or what activities they can do together. And I actually have a list of activities she likes to do. So if someone is hanging with her, you know, and they're like, oh, what do we do now? They can just check, and there's like a plethora of things they could do.
For sure. I think that's amazing that you've been able to find that group. And I think it's awesome that you're really prioritizing making sure that they're there for the long run.
Yeah. So I'm gonna need help.
Yeah, for sure. We also noticed that you're super active on social media, you know, posting things like your schedules or even just little updates about what you and your mom are up to. What in particular drew you to that, and how has that played a role in your caregiving experience so far?
Right. So let's see, like in January, it was the end of January when I moved home. And then it was the very beginning of March that the pandemic began, and we were like day one of lockdown and her class had canceled. And I just was posting about it on my personal Instagram page. And I got a lot of responses from friends and also people, you know, you're friends with like so many people on social media and only like a handful of them are actually like your people. And all of these other people who I've known and been acquaintances with were like, I didn't know, I'm so sorry, and were reaching out to me. A lot of them have parents or grandparents that have been through the same thing. So I just had this huge outpouring of support. And in that weird month in between my stepdad passing at the end of January and then March, like, I don't know, 10th or whenever it was, I kind of felt sort of isolated, even though there were a lot of people around. You know, obviously I was grieving as well. I don't know, I just suddenly was inspired to just start posting about it a little bit more, and it made me feel a little less alone. And then when I came down here to North Carolina to quarantine at my brother's house, because it would have been my mom and I alone in our house where my stepfather had passed, and it just felt like the walls were closing in, kind of. So I came to my brother's and I just kept posting things, and I realized that maybe it was something that could help other people. And I started to look up other caregivers using the hashtag millennial caregiver, and I found so many people caring for loved ones with all different types of, you know, ailments and illnesses. And I don't know what it was. I just felt like I guess I have to do this. And I brainstormed a whole bunch of names and ideas and asked friends for support and started my mother's memory keeper on Instagram, and it very clearly became the right thing to do, and I wanted to keep up with it. And it also felt like a really good way for me to get off my chest the daily struggles. Somehow, even though it's clearly super public, it feels kind of anonymous at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense. So I felt like I was able to really share my struggles, and lots of people were understanding of it and were giving me feedback, and then it connected me to this whole other world, like for you with memories and all these other organizations and people who had so many resources, and it just kind of built up. And actually the days that I don't post, it's usually because I'm just really burnt out or exhausted or forgot, or we've been busy and having a good time and I'm saving the posts, but I feel kind of guilty. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't said anything to you guys. So it's actually become something I've been really excited about, and I'm trying to think like, what more can I do now? How can I make this even more useful? Which is why I've started to try to think of any tip or useful resource. And I also want to be candid and transparent. So I know there are a lot of people out there who try to like post the grass is always greener and like rose tinted glasses of everything, but that is not caregiving for me. We definitely have a lot more bad days than good, which is something I'm trying to work on with us. And I really want to share that with other people because it's a hard thing. And like I said, I think before you were even recording that, you know, at some point, everyone's going to be making a caregiving decision, whether it's for themselves, for a sibling, any other relative or a parent. And it's important to know what goes into it if you make the choice that I've made to care for my mom myself.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really amazing that you've been able to take almost like a negative experience in a way and find like a positive aspect of personal self-growth and also for helping other people. I just think that's really admirable, and especially at such a young age to be able to see that kind of silver lining is just a really admirable trait. So I have a lot of respect for you for doing that.
I talk to a lot of other caregivers, millennial and otherwise, and I feel like a few things that we all end up saying is like, oh, I just gotta laugh now, or I've gotta laugh it off, or just look on the bright side, because otherwise it would just be so sad and really, really heartbreaking. And if you can't look at the silver linings, I think it would be harder. So I'm glad that I'm able to kind of convey that to everybody else.
No, yeah, you're more than conveying it for sure. I guess I honestly feel like it's easier said than done when you're having those bad days to see the silver lining. So I guess, what are some strategies you use, or some strategies you recommend to kind of look at the glass half full when you're having those harder days with your mom?
Right. Well, I mean, this is something I'm always working on, and I definitely feel like I can be doing better. I mean, I think it was on Saturday, we had a really rough day, and I was not finding a silver lining. I was just very upset that whole day. But at the end of the day, my silver lining was actually able to just talk to somebody else going through the same experience. So that's one thing I do. Like, even though I'm feeling so lonely sometimes, and like I just want to shut down, I definitely have to make a personal effort to reach out to another caregiver, or actually to a mom or a dad, like a parent, because it's basically like parenting, and connect and talk about it with them. And that usually always helps. Another big thing is self-care. Especially on those really, really hard days, I know that I need to take a step back and do something for myself, even if it's something super small or indulgent or silly, or like, I don't know, it can be anything from literally just breathing for a few minutes, or taking a little longer in the shower instead of rushing because I'm panicked about leaving her alone, or I don't like putting on makeup, or actually like doing something for myself. Another thing I've been doing recently is getting really into essential oils, because scent is such a strong like part of your psyche. So making sure I've got like a routine going with that. I actually rub my mom down with lavender oil. I mix it in her lotion at night before she goes to bed. And the nights that I forget, ironically, to do that, she definitely doesn't sleep as well. So I know that works. I always, so sorry. Tilly, no ma'am. I know, that's an evil skateboard.
Yeah. I'll pause it really quick.
Anyways, I definitely struggle with trying to, find time for myself. But when I do, it means the world. Like, it just totally changes my perspective and how I'm feeling that day. And then the other biggest part for finding the silver lining has actually been educating myself. It sounds kind of boring and lame, but learning more and more about the disease has been huge. And one thing that really struck me when I read it, I took a course through the Jennifer Brush Foundation, and she focuses on Montessori style dementia approach. And I took a course through her, and it says that they're not giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. So the days that she's really personally attacking me, or she's nasty, or is throwing something at me, or is just crying or upset, or she doesn't want to do anything, she wants to be left alone. And, especially because she's my mom, everybody argues with their parents, and my initial instinct is to argue with her, and be like, why are you being so mean to me? Why are you giving me such a hard time? But she isn't doing it on purpose, and she's the one actually struggling with something and doesn't know how to actually convey it, or doesn't know what's wrong. So recognizing that and educating myself about all of that helps me to take a step back and be like, okay, what does she need right now? And that has helped, because sometimes it's literally something as simple as she's thirsty and she's just getting upset. And I get her water and everything's so much better. And I'm like, yes, like I knew what she needed and I was able to give it to her, and she's so much better now. That's all it was. It was something small. So educating myself, self-care, and talking with other people who are either caregivers or parents caring for a child are like the three biggest things to help me get through really rough days.
For sure. I think educating yourself is like a super interesting one to bring attention to, because I mean, as like you said, like when you go through these experiences, it's not your first instinct. We're very like, I guess, us-centric in a way, and we're thinking about how the issues like affecting us. But
Right.
it's really amazing that you've been able to take a step back and kind of look at it from the alternate perspective and approach the situation differently.
Yeah. Because I know you guys are trying to, compile resources, and there are so many resources out there for all sorts of dementia and specifically for Alzheimer's. And it's just there. You just got to find it all and read through it all and educate yourself or take your course. And it's finding the time to do that while caring for somebody. And that's why I knew it was really important to do earlier on. I mean, of course, it's a continuous learning curve because the disease changes so often, but finding out the information and learning about why some behaviors are happening has helped immensely.
For sure.
Yeah.
I guess one thing that I'm almost blown away by is the maturity of handling the situation at such a young age, because I think not an experience that a lot of young people have to go through, at least like not this early in their life, right?
Yeah.
So how has that been emotionally for you, being able to handle all this?
Yeah. Well, of course, that's something that I push deep down, like probably everybody else. I actually had a friend visiting us last weekend, and we talked about this a lot. We've known each other since we were babies. And she says to me, like, you were always the mom. You were always taking care of us and cooking us food, even as a teenager. And that wasn't normal. And I guess my mom has been sort of this way for such a large part of my life, where I've had to kind of fend for myself and be that responsible person for so long that helped me to be where I am right now. But in terms of the emotion, I think I mentioned earlier, like on Saturday, we just had a rough day. She was so upset and really mean. A big thing that happens, not to everybody with Alzheimer's, but to a lot of people, is they can get really nasty in what they say. And it's very hard not to take it personally. And on this particular day, I was not able to not take it personally. There was, I just felt very upset by it. And I know for sure, for a lot of what's happened, like from losing my stepdad through until now, there's a lot that I haven't dealt with. And it's emerging, I think people, especially because mental health awareness is becoming such a bigger conversation topic now for everybody, especially on social media. I know that if you're not talking about it or dealing with it, it'll rear its head somehow. And that's definitely been happening more recently. And it's conversations I've been trying to have with other caregivers, talking about anxiety, and of course depression and feeling lonely and overwhelmed. And that's super normal for caregivers. There's nothing else that can possibly happen that wouldn't make those emotions come forward. Oh, here comes my mom. We have a National Weather Service advisor with flash flood warnings. Thank you, Mom.
Is that here?
It might be here, but luckily it's not raining yet. So unless Noah's Ark just starts coming through, I think we're going to be okay.
Oh, hell. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Is there action?
It's off. She got a weather alert on her phone. You know, those big like, meh, meh, meh. And she was probably sitting there like, what do I do? But yeah, in terms of dealing with the emotions, it is definitely an incredibly overwhelming role. It is a job. It's full time. I don't have any other job. I'm not working. I moved home after living away and working abroad for a long time, unemployed with dreams of doing other things when my life changed. And there are plenty of caregivers out there that work full-time and part-time as well as caregiving, and I applaud them. I have no idea how they do it, because it's draining and exhausting. And I think talking with other caregivers, like I attend a millennial caregiver support group twice a month, that is something that has been a game changer for me. Just sharing the experiences and tips and advice for people that are at the beginning and people who are at the later stages has helped with the emotions, to not feel so overwhelmed, because when you're in the middle of caregiving and a problem arises, it's really hard to see the bigger picture or the simple solutions. And something like she kept tripping over stuff at night, and I would leave a light on, but she would turn it off to save electricity because that's what she always did. And I would get so frustrated, and she slipped one night and I just couldn't see what to do. And a friend of mine was like, why don't you get motion lights that plug into a wall? And I was like, that is so obviously, why don't I just get motion lights? That just makes sense. Or a night light. Like, I don't know why I didn't think of it. And being able to communicate with other people has helped with those stressors and the anxieties a lot.
For sure, for sure. And I think it's amazing that you've been able to find this external millennial support on top of like the support you're getting from your family. I guess, what was your journey like to finding that group, or how did you go about doing that? Because I know from doing these interviews, like a lot of times when the diagnosis comes or when the symptoms start to show, people feel very lost. So how do you go, especially younger caregivers? So how do you go about finding a group like that?
Okay, so the first resource was my mom's neurologist. So it's the person who had diagnosed her. And he had apparently been recommending a couple local things to the area to my stepdad and my mom for years. And just due to the, denial and the overwhelming aspect of it all, they never pursued them. So one of the first things I did after my stepdad passed, I knew that I was going to need time, not just putting my mom with somebody. I needed her to be stimulated and with other people sharing her experience so she didn't feel alone. So the first place that her neurologist had recommended was this place called Insight Memory Care, which is local to Fairfax County, Virginia. We don't live there anymore, and they're virtual right now, but at the time we could go in person. Of course, they also connected us with our local Alzheimer's Association chapter, which for your local Alzheimer's Association chapter, there's usually lists of memory cafes, which is something you and your loved one with dementia can go to. It's usually like an hour, and you're with other people, and they play games like Jeopardy, and they have conversations, and sometimes a meal is provided, and things like that. So I started attending those with my mom, the Memory Cafe. And then through Insight Memory Care, which is essentially a dementia senior daycare center that offers respite care. Through them, they offered caregiver support groups. So we pay for the program that we do with them, but all of their support groups are free to the public. You don't need to be participating in any of their paid programs. And I was attending their support groups. Okay, their support group is wonderful. So I by no means didn't like them. I really enjoyed the support group. It was the first time I felt connected to other people with a shared journey. I didn't feel so alone. And there was a lot of resources in these people who were going through the same thing at all different stages. So there were some people in the support group who had already lost a spouse to dementia. And then there were some like me who were just starting. The only problem was I'm 28 years old, and everybody there was like 50 or older. I mean, I'm assuming their age, but they were definitely older, and they were caring for a spouse or a 90-year-old parent. And although everything resonated with me and I could connect, I just felt like there was something not quite connecting the dots for me. And that was more of a struggle, because it wasn't like anyone was meaning to be condescending, but it was kind of like, oh, sweetie, well, have you tried this? And of course, everyone was being helpful, but I just felt like I couldn't really be myself with the group. And it was not until I started my Instagram that I connected to all these other people, and I found the Millennial Caregiver hashtag, and I followed it, and there are just so many other people to connect with. And immediately a friend of mine who also cares for her mother who's in late stages, her name is Nikki, and she runs the log cabin in Brooklyn. It's called A Log Cabin in Brooklyn, Facebook and Instagram. I found her page somehow just on the suggested followers. I started following her, and the very next day she reached out to me and was like, here's my phone number, call me if you need anything. And I was like, okay, stranger, I'll do that. And I did. I just called her. And that was a huge thing. Like, you need to be brave. You need to join a support group and sit with people it's like group therapy, and so many people don't want to talk about their problems, but I really had nowhere else to go. So I just took a leap and called her and joined these groups, and it kind of went from there. And she said, it's so funny, I've been thinking of making this support group. And I was like, yes, do it, please. I will try to join every single one, and maybe we'll find other people to join. And now there are about 6 of us who cycle in, some just once a month, some both times. And it's been wonderful having those people. But it all started with her doctor. So I would recommend whoever else has recently got a diagnosis, ask the neurologist or, just their general doctor, like, what resources are there? And they can point you in the direction of anything going on locally or online that could help.
For sure. And I think it's amazing that you're able to use those resources and then, like, I guess, be brave in order to find this new support group, because I think we've been doing these caregiver interviews for a while now. And something that has been a trend is that a lot of times younger caregivers feel almost alienated in those support groups. Not that they're not helpful, but like they're not necessarily experiences you can relate to. And I just think the innovative ways that young caregivers are coming up with finding other people like you who are going through experiences like you is just a really admirable thing. So kudos.
It was the most beneficial thing. I mean, you're alone, but you don't have to go through the journey alone. And as soon as you're talking to other people, or as soon as I was talking to other people, I was like, wow, okay, this is what I can do, and these are other resources. And it just made it more manageable, even in the smallest ways.
For sure, for sure. And just to be cognizant of time, just thank you so much for interviewing with us. But I guess my last question would be, like, what's the biggest thing you think you've learned about yourself through this experience?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? A car went by.
Sorry, yeah. What's the biggest lesson you've learned about yourself since you've gone through this experience of caregiving?
Biggest lesson I've learned about myself. Wow, I mean, it's a pretty deep question. I think a huge thing I've learned about myself is that I have spent already so much of my life before this being a huge caregiver, mother, parent to so many people. Like, I'm a nurturer, and now I'm a huge empath, which is a blessing and a curse. And I've definitely learned that too. And I've realized that because I've always spent so much time caring for other people, I haven't spent so much time really getting to know myself and what I would need if I wanted to be cared for, or how I like to be taken care of, and how I can take care of myself. And I am learning every day that doing something for myself and taking care of myself personally, my health, is way more important than I think I ever expected it to be. Because when the days that I'm much more burnt out, then she's not going to have a good day, because I'm not cared for myself. So if you're not caring for yourself, how can you take care of somebody else? And that's a huge thing, like trying to figure out what I like to do in my free time and what hobbies I have. And of course I have hobbies, and like I know things that I like to do, but I've never put too much thought into it, because I've always been helping other people. So now I really want to emphasize it for myself, and that's a big thing. I've also learned that life is so short, and I know that's very cliche, but I never expected my life to change this way so quickly. And that really, like, if we're not just living every day trying to make it the best day possible, then what are we doing? Because we could drop dead at any time, especially now with the virus. So when she's having a rough day, and if I'm perpetuating it because I haven't cared for myself, or I haven't slept well, or taken time, and it's just building into like this huge feud between us in the afternoon, like, that's not going to be great. Why waste our time? Let's just try to figure out a way to shift whatever it is that we're doing into something more positive. And those are two things. Like, I really want to get to know myself better and care for myself better, and then try to be more present in what I'm doing.
For sure. Well, thank you again for sitting down.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was super great hearing this perspective.
Yeah, I'm happy to do this anytime.
Sure.
I hope this helps other people.
For sure. And if other people want more information about your where can they find you on Instagram?
So yeah, please, they can reach out to me. So I'm on Instagram at my mother's memory keeper. I have a private Facebook. I think I might change that soon, but right now they can just find me on Instagram. And if they don't have Instagram and only have Facebook, then maybe we can find a way to connect so that I can get them on my Facebook so they can see the stories I post too, because I think it's important. And maybe one day I'll have a blog. I don't know. Baby steps.
For sure. Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much. It was great talking with you.